Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Belcourt's Drive-In Movie Night, our viewing of The Matrix. My name is Dan Levin. I'm a psychologist from Vanderbilt University. I study cognition and perception, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the science of The Matrix. Now, whenever you have some professor coming in telling you about the science of some movie, there's a fundamental way in which you have a choice between the blue pill and the red pill. If we take the blue pill, I'm going to tell you about all the ways in which the crazy ideas in this movie are totally bogus. And that'll let you go home thinking the same. But on the other hand, we could try the red pill. And we could maybe consider the possibility that some of the ideas in this movie aren't all that far from the truth, and maybe in some pretty surprising ways that might change the way you think about your perception of your reality. So to get a start, let's go down the rabbit hole and take a look at this movie.
Hi, Sabina.
Hi.
Well, it's been a long time since I've seen you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Andrea.
So how did you get here?
I took the subway from Middleton, and it took only about half an hour.
Really? I drove from Gresham, and it took 45 minutes.
Hooray for public transportation.
So why did you call me here for this mysterious meeting?
I'm planning a surprise party for Jerome, and I need your help to keep him away from the house.
That's great. I'll do anything you need.
Good.
I hate surprise parties, but only when I'm the victim. Otherwise, they're great.
Very good.
Okay, so the question here is, what came into your eyes and ears from that movie versus what did you actually experience? From one point of view, what came into your eyes and ears was a series of individual shots that are jammed together with these totally discontinuous edits. And yet what you experience is a continuous event. But there's more than that, because not only were each of the edits sudden transitions between views, but there was a great big continuity error on each one of those edits. In one of the edits, a scarf appeared. And the other edit, the scarf disappeared. In another edit, the plates on the table changed from red to white. In yet another case, one of the actress's hands moved positions. So there's this virtual circus of discontinuity where objects are suddenly changing, and yet people still perceive this continuous event. We showed this to participants long ago, and they all said it looked fine. None of them saw any of the sudden between view impossible changes. So it looks like there's this disconnect between the information that's coming in, which is really discontinuous, and our understanding or our perception of continuous reality. Now, one objection to this experiment is that random stuff's changing. It's not the main thing we're paying attention to. Surely, if we showed participants a movie in which the main thing you're paying attention to, for example, the sole actor or actress in a scene, suddenly change into a whole nother person across a cut, they would notice immediately. Well, as you can see, we made some movies like that. And again, we saw a lot of people fail to detect the substitution of one actor for another. Okay, maybe what's going on here is that people have difficulty keeping track of the properties of objects as they go from one shot in a movie to the next. Surely they understand the events themselves. So take a look at this movie. Here we see a guy using a screwdriver. What could be simpler? And yet, this movie also has something strange in it. If you look at it again, you'll see that the guy was using the screwdriver before he actually grabbed it. There was a backwards event in there. And when we show this to participants, we find that they often have a lot of difficulty detecting when the event goes backwards. Another thing you can ask is, okay, maybe it's hard to see quick events, it's hard to see properties. All of these things can change and not affect our sense of continuity. But certainly when you watch a movie, you always know that something's there. Surely you can tell the difference between something and nothing. So that was the next thing we tested. Pay close attention to what happens here. Did you notice that in the middle of the collision, the whole movie disappeared. So when we showed these movies to participants, again, a lot of them really seemed to be paying attention to the movie. They understood what was going on, but 2/3 of participants did not detect that the movie disappeared. Now, there's one final objection to all of this, and that is, we're looking at media here. These are situations where people are perceiving movies or other mediated forms of reality. And in those situations, maybe we really kind of aren't in very close contact with our perceptual world. After all, the movies are a special sort of stimulus. Maybe they work on principles that are very, very different from the perceptual principles that guide us through our everyday lives in reality. Well, if that's true, and you approach somebody on the street and began a conversation with them, then all of a sudden they were switched with another person right in front of you. That should come as a terrible surprise. Well, as you can see, we did that, and it didn't come as a terrible surprise. Half of the participants in this experiment failed to detect the substitution of their real-world conversation partner. So what this implies is that maybe there's a deeper similarity between perception in the movies and perception in the real world than we might have thought. Maybe we make inferences about the movies, we fill in blanks, just like we do in the real world. So discussion question number 1 here, does this mean that the matrix could actually work? If our experience of reality is really sort of an interchange between perceptual information and the things we know, maybe it's not so hard to substitute out a little of that perceptual information and put us in a vat, allowing the things we know to be the primary drivers of our experience. Okay, I don't know if that's true or not. I think in ways it is, in ways it's not. The second question is, if you're going to make a movie that questions reality, how do you do it? Well, it seems like filmmakers really have a couple of different choices. One way they could do it is to create a film that uses all of the tricks and methods of cinema to create good continuity, to integrate all of the shots in ways that don't disturb the viewer. Because after all, what you want is the viewers to think about the story. You don't want them to think about all the ways in which these shots may or may not be fitting together. In contrast, another approach might be to allow there to be some discontinuities, some mismatches between shots, maybe even some continuity errors, things that will shake viewers out of their complacency, make them realize that, yeah, they are making a lot of inferences. They are missing a lot of the ways in which the perceptual information they're getting is inconsistent. Maybe it'll help them pay attention more to the construction of the film itself. Maybe it will unnerve them. Maybe it will get them out of this relaxed state, put them in an uncertain state that matches the uncertain state of the characters. So the question is, which approach did The Matrix take? When looking at the movie, I kind of get the sense that The Matrix took the first approach. It used a pretty traditional approach to do everything it could to create a strong sense of continuity and really lead the viewers to focus a lot more on the ideas in the story than the construction of the movie itself. The first scene to take a look at is a scene where Neo meets someone very special. Here's the beginning of the scene.
You're the Oracle?
Bingo.
And let's take a look at the shots that make up the scene. It starts out with wide coverage of each character, and it sort of keeps that wide coverage for quite a number of views. So you can see as Neo enters the room in that first shot, it's sort of a medium long shot covering him from about his knees up, and she's shown in almost a long shot. And then we switch back and forth between some pretty similar views, allowing the viewers plenty of time to build up a sense of space before we start cutting into closer views. By the end of this sequence, we're looking mostly at close-ups. Now, this is a pretty traditional approach. It's called an analytic approach, where you start with the big overall views and then cut into views that are really subsets of those overall views. Another little interesting moment happens in the middle of this sequence, when the person Neo is talking to, who I'm not going to tell you about because she's really important to the movie and I don't want to spoil the fun, approaches Neo. She touches him and then moves his head as she examines him. There's an edit right in the middle of that movement. You can see it here. That edit is called a match action edit. It's an edit that places a cut right in the middle of a movement, such that the shot showing the beginning of the movement matches the state of affairs or the state of progress pretty much exactly with the shot that shows the end of the movement. When you do a match action edit, you have some choices. You can do that exact match, but you don't have to. You can put a little gap in there, or you can overlap the shots. Some editors will do that, especially if they want to start manipulating the reality, if they want maybe to start disorienting the viewer a little bit here. One thing you notice about the match action edits in The Matrix is that they're pretty precise matches. Now, one of the interesting things about this movie is you can compare the lack of continuity errors and the tight matches between shots in The Matrix with a lot of other movies where the matching between shots is a lot looser. One of the most well-known examples is in the movie The Godfather. If you watch The Godfather and want to have not a lot of fun, try to look for continuity errors. You'll see a lot of them. One hint here is to watch Diane Keaton's hands. So for example, in this scene, she's having a really heavy conversation with Michael. Take a look at where her hands are. Look at the hand that's on the glass. It happens several times throughout this scene that the position of her hand on the glass changes from shot to shot. And that's one of the smallest continuity errors involving Diane Keaton's hands. One final thing to look out for in The Godfather is the legendary cigarette problem. If you've got a little object like a cigarette and you have a bunch of cuts between views that both show the cigarette, look out, you could be in trouble. So for example, here's Diane Keaton. One moment she doesn't have the cigarette, and all of a sudden it's there. Another interesting set of films that you can compare The Matrix with are films that really sort of go the other route. They show unusual mental experiences by creating a lot of perceptual discontinuity. And in doing that, maybe what they're doing is inducing a perceptual sense of unease in us, or a sense that we don't quite know what's going on, that kind of matches the experiences of the characters. One really well-known example of that is the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. In this movie, there are a huge number of continuity errors, changes, and mismatches that are all really pretty clearly quite intentional. So for example, in this scene from the very beginning of the movie, you can see a little ellipsis, a little moment where experience just disappears. So take a look at the book there, and you can see there's just a little jump cut. And it's occurring in a character who kind of does have a fundamentally disordered mental state. Here's another example. When the character, this is played by Jim Carrey, meets Clementine on the train, here's a little edit that again produces an ellipsis, a little jump, a little discontinuity that I think is probably intentional. Again, these characters have disordered mental states, and they're kind of recovering from lost memory at this point in the story. And the filmmaker's kind of showing it with some discontinuity. Okay, so our second discussion question is, how conscious a choice do you think it was to create a film about sort of questioning reality in a way that uses a very traditional high continuity approach? And do you think it would have been a different film? And how do you think it would have been a different film if they'd have done something different? If they would have used a low continuity approach where you can experience some of these gaps between shots, some of these inconsistencies? Okay, go discuss. And thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the movie.